Close your eyes and listen to the sea, the gentle groan of the timbers, the whisper of the tide. It sounds peaceful, doesn't it? But peace is only the mask the ocean wears to hide the monsters beneath. Forget the stories of golden treasure and daring captains. Those were bedtime lies, told to keep dreamers dreaming. The truth tastes of salt and rust. It reeks of fear and blood. Every deck is a coffin. Every sunrise, a coin tossed between life and death. This isn't a tale of adventure. It's a descent into the jaws of cruelty itself. Elias Thorne was a man of the sea, a quiet craftsman shaped by wind and wood. But the sea does not love those who serve it. It takes, it breaks, and it never forgets. Dragged from his home, bound in chains, Elias was reborn beneath the black flag into a world where mercy drowned long ago. What he found was not freedom, but survival, bought with pain and paid for in blood. This is the brutal history of the Black Flag, a story not written in ink, but carved into flesh, bone, and the endless sea.
So let's now get to the real story. In the year of our Lord 1718, a carpenter named Elias toiled in the bustling port of Bristol. His life was one of quiet craft, building sturdy ships for trade. But even in his peaceful world, the shadow of the king's navy and its brutal press gangs loomed large. One fateful dawn, that shadow found him.
He had heard the tales. Men dragged from their beds, snatched from taverns, forced into service aboard warships. Elias had always believed his skill would protect him, that his quiet life was invisible to the cruelty of the crown. He was gravely mistaken.
The king's justice was swift and unforgiving. Elias was beaten, branded, and thrown aboard the Serpent's Coil, a pirate ship renowned for its ruthlessness, under the command of the fearsome Captain Thorne. His carpenter's hands were now fit for hauling rope, not carving wood. Captain Thorne was a man forged of iron and salt, his eyes burning with an unholy fire. He saw only another body to break, another soul to bend to his will. Elias's old life, his identity, was stripped away, replaced by the bitter taste of salt and the cold touch of iron.
Disorientation quickly gave way to the brutal reality of pirate life. Elias, attempting to follow a simple order, fumbled a rope. The mistake was immediate and the punishment swift. The whip sang through the air, delivering its first searing lesson. The pain was not just physical, it was the sting of humiliation, the death of his old self. He learned that defiance meant more pain, and survival meant absolute submission. The sea would take everything, even his spirit, if he allowed it. In the suffocating darkness of the lower deck, Elias found a fleeting moment of respite. He met the eyes of another new recruit, a young man who shared his terror and his new forced captivity. Their shared gaze was a silent confession of despair. No words were exchanged, but none were needed. In each other's eyes, they saw the reflection of their own stolen lives, their stolen futures. They were simply bodies, tools for the captain's endless war against the world.
Elias was quickly assigned to deck duty, forced to learn the complex language of ropes and sails. He tried to mimic the experienced sailors, but his carpenter's hands were clumsy. The boatswain, a man named Black Grog, watched him with cruel amusement. Each mistake was met with a swift, painful flick of the whip. Elias learned not just the knots, but the rhythm of suffering, the necessity of speed over precision. He was not a craftsman anymore. He was a machine designed for obedience and brute force. Leap on the serpent's coil was thin and fraught with terror. Elias's deepest agony was not the physical hardship, but the relentless, haunting memory of the life he'd lost. His dreams were dominated by the familiar, comforting sight of his old carpenter's workbench, a phantom of safety he could no longer touch. He would wake up gripping the rough wood of the ship, the smell of salt replacing the scent of sawdust. The stark contrast between the order of his past life and the chaos of the present was a torture. Every day was a fight to keep the dream alive, a reminder of the man he was before the press gang changed his name and sealed his fate. Whispers like rats scurried through the lower decks. The older pirates, in cruel amusement, told Elias and the new recruits of their likely fate, the gallows. Escape was impossible, and capture meant the hangman's noose. Elias, a man of law and order, now found himself condemned by both sides. If he escaped, the crown would hang him. If he stayed, the sea would claim him. His only choice was how he would die. The pirate's remedy for fear, sickness, and cold was grog, a foul, diluted rum ration. Elias was a reluctant drinker, but the biting cold and the weight of his new life forced him to accept the daily measure. It was a crude anesthetic, numbing his mind to the brutality around him. He watched the other pirates descend into drunken rages and temporary oblivion. Elias learned to nurse the drink, using it only for the immediate necessity, refusing to surrender his mind entirely. In a world of chaos, his sobriety became his last desperate defense. Elias was relegated to the lowest tasks. One day, while scrubbing the filthy deck, he stumbled and nearly fell overboard, catching himself just in time on a thick rope. The near-death experience brought him a strange, cold clarity. He realized his clumsiness was a liability, not a virtue. He had to learn not just to survive, but to master the ship, to become a shadow in its brutal ballet. His carpenter's precision, once his pride, now had to be adapted to a world of violence. The diet on the serpent's coil was abysmal: stale biscuits, worm-ridden meat, and little fresh food. Elias, like many, began to suffer from the dreaded scurvy, his gums bleeding, his teeth loosening. It was a slow, agonizing descent into decay. He had seen men die from this slow, hideous disease. There was no cure, only the slow rotation of fate. He had to scavenge, searching for any scrap of lemon or lime, anything that whispered of the earth and life. His survival became an obsessive, desperate hunt for vitamins.
Not all aboard were brutal simpletons. Silas, the quartermaster, was a quiet, intelligent man who handled the ship's logistics and commanded a dangerous respect. He watched Elias's movements, noting the precision and efficiency hidden beneath his clumsiness. Silas understood that a ship of chaos needed a core of efficiency. He saw in Elias a potential tool, a man who possessed the meticulous discipline that the captain lacked. He filed the observation away, a quiet plan forming in his pragmatic mind. During a violent storm, the ship's rudder sustained damage. Elias, drawing on his old carpentry skill, secretly studied the flaw. Without tools and under the cover of night, he began to make crude, silent repairs, using only salvaged wood and metal pieces. He worked not for the captain, but for his own survival. A broken ship meant a watery grave for all. His former skill was now a vital, secret weapon. He realized that, even as a slave, he possessed a power no pirate could match: the ability to build and sustain.
The following day, Silas cornered Elias, not to punish him, but to test him. He pointed to a complex structural flaw in a mast, demanding an immediate, detailed assessment. It was a test of loyalty through competence. Elias instinctively provided a precise, clear plan for the repair, demonstrating his mastery of wood and structure. Silas, satisfied, dismissed him without a word. Elias had passed the quartermaster's silent examination and secured his temporary value, moving him from expendable crew to necessary asset. Among the Serpent's Coil crew was Nicholas, a strange, eccentric man known as the Alchemist. He was not a fighter, but a keeper of arcane knowledge, part medic, part poisoner. He noticed Elias's scurvy and his subtle scavenging. Nicholas found Elias's desperate, focused survival to be an interesting study. He offered Elias a small, preserved lemon peel, not out of kindness, but to observe the effect. He was a scientist without morals, seeing life only as an experiment.
During a quick raid on a small merchant vessel, the pirates discovered a stowaway, a young woman named Anya, a fierce, determined figure caught beneath a pile of cargo. She was not a victim, but a survivor, her eyes burning with an untamed defiance. The pirates saw only a prize, another thing to break. But Captain Thorne, in a moment of warped judgment, decided to take her captive, not as a commodity, but as a potential crew member, intrigued by her sheer fury. She was bound for a life of forced service. Aboard the Serpent's Coil, Anya refused to submit. When ordered to clean the deck, she spat at the captain's feet. Her defiance was raw, immediate, and earned her a brutal, public lashing. But she took the pain without a sound. Elias watched the lashing, recognizing his own silent suffering in her open defiance. She was everything
he was afraid to be. Her punishment was a public lesson in control, but to Elias, it was a spark, a reminder that absolute submission was a choice, not a necessity.
In the ship's cramped sickbay, Elias saw Anya tending her own wounds. He offered her the last piece of his salvaged lemon. This gesture, small and profound, was their first true communication, a shared understanding of the need for survival. Anya took the offering, her expression unreadable but accepting. She understood the sacrifice. They were two lone survivors in a sea of monsters, their silent pact sealed by a shared struggle against the sickness of the ship. Elias began to study the ship, not as his prison, but as a structure to be undone. His meticulous mind mapped the weak points, the hidden caches of tools, and the rhythms of the guard rotations. His desperation was transforming into a deliberate surgical plan. He realized a ship's strength lay in its cohesion, and its weakness lay in its complexity. His knowledge, the knowledge of the builder, was the key to their freedom. He was no longer just a victim, he was the future architect of their escape. Seeing Elias's disciplined focus and Anya's fierce spirit, finally acted. He called Elias to his cabin and presented a direct, brutal proposition. Help him overthrow Thorn or suffer the inevitable fate of the ship. Silas revealed his own motive. He was not a true pirate, but a man driven by necessity, desperate to return to a life he'd lost. He saw the potential for a clean escape, provided Elias could guarantee the ship's integrity. The alliance was formed not on friendship, but on mutual desperation and pragmatic skill.
Silas then approached Nicholas, the alchemist, offering him freedom and a safe supply of exotic flora in exchange for his unique, terrible skill. Nicholas agreed, seeing the coup not as a moral act, but as an excellent, violent experiment. The plan required a diversion, a quick, debilitating sickness to incapacitate the loyalists. Nicholas would create a slow-acting sedative, not a poison. He accepted the task with the clinical detachment of a scientist, indifferent to the chaos he was about to unleash. Elias knew they needed a fighter, a distraction, and an observer. He passed a subtle message to Anya while working near her, a coded reference to a knot only true sailors would understand. It was a test of her readiness, a final call to arms. Anya's response was immediate. She mirrored the knot structure in her own ropework, signaling her understanding and fierce commitment. She was ready to turn her defiance into action, to join the conspiracy that promised her absolute freedom. Captain Thorn, already a man driven by internal rage, grew increasingly agitated. The ship was slow, the weather poor, and his grip on the crew seemed to be slipping. He took his fury out on a random crewman, delivering a brutal public beating. The beating was a desperate attempt to restore order through terror. But the crew, weakened by the alchemist's drug and the captain's instability, watched with cold, silent resentment. His brutality was now a catalyst for the rebellion. Under the cloak of the deepest hour, the alchemist's slow-acting sedative finally took hold. The loyal pirates, Thorn's strongest supporters, slept deeply, rendered clumsy and weak by the drugged grog and water. The conspirators moved like ghosts. Elias, with Silas and Anya, slipped through the lower decks, disarming the sleeping men, replacing their weapons with blanks, and rendering them powerless. The quiet victory was a testament to patience and cunning, not brute force.
The final stage of the coup depended on a precise signal. Elias, using his knowledge of the ship's ropes, carefully and quickly cut the main rigging for the mizzenmast. The subtle, dangerous snapping sound was the silent signal for Silas to move. The small structural failure was noticed only by Silas, who was waiting below. He understood the meaning of the sound. The ship was now vulnerable, and the captain was about to be surrounded. The long-awaited moment of freedom had arrived. Silas confronted Captain Thorne in his cabin, a place of false luxury. Thorne, already suspicious and half-drugged, roared in disbelief. The confrontation was not a clash of swords, but a final, bitter battle of wills. Thorne, realizing the depth of the betrayal, drew his pistol, but his hand was slow and clumsy due to the sedative. Elias, Anya, and the alchemist burst in, surrounding the captain. The coup was complete, but the captain's fury was still a deadly threat. The battle was quick and decisive. Thorne, still half-drugged and disoriented, was overpowered. He was tied and gagged. His terrible reign ended not by a glorious battle, but by a quiet, humiliating betrayal. The snake was finally coiled. Silas claimed the captain's logbook and the ship's instruments. Elias, without malice, took the captain's hidden tool belt. The power was transferred not to a new tyrant, but to a collective of 3 unlikely survivors who now possessed the key to their escape. With Thorne secured, Silas took command. He addressed the stunned crew, offering them a choice: remain on the ship or take a share of the small gold and leave on the captured merchant vessel. The mutiny was not for power, but for dissolution. Most chose to leave, fearing the navy more than the devil. The pirates dispersed, taking their chaos with them. Left aboard the Serpent's Coil were only Elias, Silas, Anya, and Nicholas, the 4 who sought true escape. The 4 remaining conspirators made a terrible collective decision. Captain Thorne was too dangerous to release. They placed him in a longboat, with minimal water and no supplies, casting him adrift into the vast, indifferent ocean. It was an act of grim necessity, not murder. Elias felt the weight of the moral compromise, the final, unavoidable sin of his pirate life. They watched the longboat shrink until the captain was a mere speck, swallowed by the waves and the immense horizon. With the captain gone, Nicholas the alchemist declared his departure. He took a small portion of the gold and left on the merchant vessel, seeking a distant tropical port where he could continue his bizarre chemical experiments undisturbed. He offered them a final cryptic warning about the sea's unending hunger. He was a creature of knowledge, not loyalty. The 3 remaining figures watched him sail away, knowing they had lost an ally, but had gained a critical tool: his hidden chest of medicinal herbs. Left alone on the Serpent's Coil were the 3: Elias, the reluctant carpenter; Silas, the pragmatic quartermaster; and Anya, the fierce, silent stowaway. They stood on the empty deck, the ship a ghost of its former chaos, united by a single desperate need: absolute freedom. They knew the Navy was hunting a pirate ship. Their best chance was to flee the sea entirely, to vanish into the deep, forgotten mainland. The former pirate ship, still flying the coiled serpent flag, was their last terrible chance at life. Elias, now using the captain's superior tools, began to methodically refit the Serpent's Coil. His skilled hands, finally freed to perform their true task, strengthened the hull, repaired the mast, and prepared the ship for the long, dangerous journey to the edge of the known world. Silas managed the logistics, and Anya stood constant watch. They were a perfect, self-sufficient crew of 3, their skills compensating for their lack of manpower. The ship was still a symbol of evil, but now it was a vessel of defiant escape. Silas's caution was warranted. From the horizon, a cluster of sails appeared, a fast-moving Navy frigate, identifiable by its precise lines and speed. The hunt was on, and the Crown's justice was closing in fast. There was no turning back. If captured, their fate was the gallows. Elias pushed the ship to its limits, realizing that their only defense was the pirate ship's superior speed and his own carpentry skills, ensuring the stress points wouldn't break. Just as the Navy drew close, the sea offered a brutal temporary reprieve. A sudden violent squall broke, turning the smooth sea into a churning nightmare. Elias used the familiar chaos to his advantage, maneuvering the coil through the impossible waves. The frigate, built for war, not agility, was forced to pull back. The pirate ship, built for endurance and speed, survived the storm's embrace. They had escaped the Navy, but the terrifying power of the sea was a constant, indifferent enemy. Safe from the Navy, Silas finally confessed a sliver of his past to Elias. He wasn't a pirate by trade. He was a former merchant, forced to abandon his debt-ridden wife to the mercy of the press gangs years ago, a choice that still haunted him. His pragmatism was a shield against this terrible guilt. He sought not wealth, but disappearance. Elias realized they were not just running from the law, they were running from their past choices. Their bond deepened through shared consequence.
Days later, they reached the coast of a vast, uncharted continent, a wild, forgotten land, a place where the Crown's law held no sway. The thick, green, untamed jungle met the sea, beckoning them with the promise of true anonymity. They decided their freedom lay inland, or the mountains rose high, cutting them off from the sea and the world. Their ultimate safety required them to abandon the last remnant of their old lives, the ship. Elias was given the final, symbolic task, scuttling the Serpent's Coil. He placed explosive charges below the waterline, using the captain's tools to ensure the ship sank deep, leaving no trace for the Navy to follow. As they rowed away, the explosion rocked the bay. The symbol of their captivity and their crime was gone, swallowed by the sea. They were now truly pirates without a ship, men and a woman without a country, defined only by their next step. They landed on the coast, carrying their meager supplies, the jungle a thick, terrifying green wall before them. The silence of the land was more overwhelming than the roar of the sea. Their new journey, away from salt and towards stone, had begun. Anya, the most adept at navigating the wild, took the lead, using her cutlass to cut a path through the suffocating undergrowth. Her strength was not in sailing, but in survival. Their dependence on her was immediate and absolute. The first night in the jungle was a baptism by fear. The strange, alien sounds of the wilderness, the buzzing of insects, the roars of unseen beasts, were overwhelming. They were sailors, terrified by the silent, relentless land. Elias, in a moment of despair, clung to the comforting weight of the captain's tool belt. The familiar touch of metal and wood, the only connection to the life of order. He realized the jungle was more merciless than the sea. Anya's survival skills were not learned at sea. She had spent her early life as a vagrant on the fringes of civilization near the wild, learning the signs of edible plants and clean water. Her knowledge was the key to their immediate survival. She taught the two former sailors the simple code of the land. Listen more than you speak, observe more than you act. Elias realized her strength lay not just in defiance,
but in a profound, practical connection to the earth. As they moved deeper inland, they found a small, terrified animal caught in a crude snare, a trap set by a local hunter, or perhaps another shipwrecked soul. The sight was a chilling reminder of their own precarious state. Elias, seeing the animal's pain and helplessness, felt a sudden, profound connection to his own captivity. Using his smallest, sharpest carpenter's tool, he quickly and cleanly freed the beast. It was an act of mercy, a way to reclaim his humanity. The animal's quick escape left behind a small trail of footprints, not of the beast, but of the hunter. Silas, the pragmatic tracker, realized they were no longer alone. The land was inhabited, and the inhabitants were watching them. The knowledge was both terrifying and hopeful. It meant resources, but also conflict. They moved with renewed stealth, realizing that their old rough clothes and European features made them aliens in this silent world.
Following the indistinct tracks, they stumbled upon something utterly unexpected: the ruins of an ancient abandoned city swallowed by the jungle. Massive, moss-covered stone walls and strange carvings rose up before them. Elias, the builder, was instantly captivated. He traced the geometry of the ancient, forgotten architects. The silent city was a monumental testament to a lost civilization, a safer haven than the jungle floor. Their momentary awe was shattered by the sharp sound of a snap. Anya had triggered a perimeter tripwire. Before they could react, they were surrounded by the jungle's true inhabitants, a group of silent, skilled, tribal hunters. The hunters were dressed in simple, earth-toned clothes and moved with the silent grace of the jungle. Their weapons were crude but effective. Elias, Silas, and Anya were quickly disarmed and bound, their journey from captivity to freedom ending in a terrifying new form of servitude. They were led deep into the heart of the ruins, toward the tribe's hidden settlement. The path was treacherous, and the air crackled with unspoken tension. The silence of their captives was more frightening than any threat. Elias instinctively noted the stonework, observing the methods used to fit the immense blocks together. Even bound, his mind was analyzing the structure, a strange mix of fear and professional curiosity overriding his panic. They were brought before the tribal council in a large open clearing. The elder, a woman named Yara, sat at the center of the fireplace, her face stern, her eyes filled with the deep, ancient wisdom of the forest. Yara spoke in a language they did not understand, but her message was clear. They were intruders, and their fate was uncertain. Elias realized that his life now depended not on force, but on finding a way to communicate their value. Yara pointed toward a section of the ancient wall near the village's water source. A crack had formed, and the village's vital spring was slowing, its flow diverted into the earth. It was a problem of stone and water, a challenge to Elias's building skills. Elias understood instantly. This was the test. Using hand gestures and the universal language of labor, he indicated he could fix it. He pointed to his hands, then to the wall, promising his skill in exchange for their lives. Yara watched Elias's desperate plea. After a long, silent moment, she commanded a guard to unbind him. The sudden freedom was a terrifying weight. Elias was handed a simple, heavy stone chisel, the tool of the ancient stoneworkers. Elias was used to wood, not stone. He would have to adapt his precise European craft to the brutal, ancient methods of this forgotten civilization. His success was their only key to continued life.
Elias worked for days, patiently clearing the vegetation, studying the original stonework, and using the crude chisel to carefully break away the damaged section. He adopted his carpenter's eye for tolerance to the unforgiving nature of stone. Finally, He used a primitive form of cement, made from local clay and minerals, to seal the fissure and redirect the flow. The spring gushed forth, strong and clean. His skill had saved the village. Yara approached Elias, her sternness replaced by a deep, cautious respect. She finally spoke a few words of broken, trade-based English. She recognized Elias not as a savage pirate, but as a man of stone, a builder. Elias's bond with his old profession had saved his life again. He was unchained, but still a guest. Silas and Anya were freed to assist him. Their new task was clear: to use their skills to earn their way into the tribe's trust. The tribe was the keeper of the ruins, living simply amidst the remnants of a vanished empire. Their life was one of communal labor and deep respect for the forest. Elias, Silas, and Anya slowly integrated, learning the rhythm of the village. Silas, the quartermaster, used his organizational skill to help the villagers with their stores, creating organized racks for medicinal herbs and food. Anya, the wilderness expert, taught hunting and trapping techniques to the younger members. Elias found peace in his work. He began assisting the village in rebuilding weak structures and designing better shelters. He worked with a meticulous focus, blending his European precision with the available native materials. His carpentry was now an act of creation, not compliance. The weight of his old life began to lift, replaced by the satisfaction of honest, respected labor. He was finding his true self in the forgotten jungle. While organizing the village's vast collection of dried herbs, Silas discovered a hidden store of ancient maps and astronomical charts, drawn on cured animal skin. These were the keys to the lost civilization's knowledge. Silas, the navigator, pored over the charts, recognizing the universal language of stars. He realized the tribe was the descendant of a great seafaring empire that had willingly abandoned the sea for the safety of the land centuries ago. Their peace was fleeting. One of the tribe's returning hunters brought grim news. He had seen signs of outsiders near the coast: large, unfamiliar boots, discarded European grog bottles, and the print of a distinctive serpent head boot buckle. The serpent had returned. Elias realized with cold dread that Captain Thorn, against all odds, had survived the open sea, following their trail of debris. Thorn was alive, and he was hunting them. Yara and the council understood the threat of the saltskins. Elias and Silas had to quickly explain the nature of Thorn's brutality. The village, which sought peace, now prepared for war, utilizing the ancient, hidden defenses of the ruins. Elias, the builder, was now tasked with turning the ruins into a fortress. His knowledge of structure and weak points, once used for repair, was now turned toward defense. The forgotten stone city would become Thorn's final trap.
Elias collaborated with Anya, who knew the jungle's terrain intimately. They designed a series of traps that utilized the natural weaknesses of the ruins: pitfalls, collapsing walls, and hidden spike snares, channeling the attackers into a single, fatal path. The plan was simple: use the jungle's chaos and the ruins' complex architecture to their advantage. Thorn would walk into a labyrinth designed by the very man he once enslaved. Silas contributed by organizing the tribe's limited weaponry and rationing the food and water stores. His quartermaster's sense of logistics ensured that the defense was not only strong, but sustainable. Every element was accounted for. Elias stood at the highest point of the ruin, looking down the path they had come. He was no longer a carpenter or a slave. He was a sentinel, the builder who stood ready to defend his new home with the very skills that had once saved his life. Captain Thorn and his remaining loyalists, driven by vengeful madness, plunged into the jungle. Their heavy European boots, used to deck planks, were clumsy on the uneven jungle floor. They followed the path, blind to the engineered threat ahead. Thorn, a creature of the sea, was profoundly out of his element. He relied on brute force, not cunning, unaware that he was walking into a trap designed by two minds that understood patience and precision. The first trap struck a loyalist pirate. A massive log, perfectly balanced by Elias's mechanism, swung from the canopy, striking the man with crushing force. The attack was silent, precise, and immediately debilitating. The sudden violence halted Thorn. He realized that he was not fighting simple natives, but an intelligence that understood mechanical warfare. The hunt had become a defensive ambush. Anya, hidden high in the stone ruins, watched the pirates' panicked reaction. She chose the next target, Black Grog, the boatswain who administered her lashing. Her aim was true, fired from a tribal bow. The arrow found its mark, a wound that was agonizing but not fatal, delivered with surgical precision. It was not a killing blow, but a clear message. Her defiance had been transformed into capability. Her debt was paid. Thorn, abandoning his injured men, charged forward alone, driven only by his maniacal need for vengeance against Elias. He knew the path led to the carpenter. The final confrontation would be a battle of brute will against precise intellect. Elias was waiting, not with a sword, but with a tool of his trade. He stood ready, holding a heavy, reinforced wooden beam, the culmination of his strength and his carpentry skill. Thorn burst through the archway, roaring. Elias did not try to fight the sword. He used the beam to strike at the captain's only exposed weakness, his leg, which had been previously injured. The blow was aimed and delivered with the force of a battering ram. The bone fractured and Thorn collapsed, his body broken, his spirit finally defeated. Elias stood over his former master, the tool of his craft, now the instrument of his justice. The serpent was finally and irrevocably uncoiled.
Thorn, broken and left for the jungle to reclaim, was simply another sacrifice to the land. Elias and Silas quickly disarmed the remaining injured pirates, ensuring no further threat remained. The final chapter of their pirate lives was sealed. The tools of the pirate, the guns, the gunpowder, the cutlasses, were stripped and buried deep beneath the roots of the ancient city. They were symbols of the violence they had rejected, buried in the earth that had granted them peace. With Thorn gone, the village returned to peace. The people now accepted Elias, Silas, and Anya not as foreigners, but as protectors. The carpenter, the quartermaster, and the survivor had found their true harbor. Elias, in particular, was revered for his defensive ingenuity. He began the long task of permanently fortifying the ancient ruins, ensuring the safety of his new home for generations. Elias took his small, sharp carving knife, the one he had used to cut the animal free, and began carving a small, simple sign into a piece of smooth, strong jungle wood. His new identity, a rejection of the past. He was no longer a carpenter forced into service, but the man of stone, the builder who found freedom not by running away, but by finally standing still. His journey was over, his life rebuilt, piece by beautiful piece. Peace had settled, but the sea is cruel. A month later, a coastal scout brought terrifying news. Another ship had landed, but this one was not a Navy frigate. It was a smaller, black-sailed brig, bearing the same coiled serpent insignia. This was no random arrival. This was Captain Vorn's second-in-command, Silas's brother, Captain Rourke, who sought not only revenge for Thorn, but the missing gold and Elias's head. The second shadow of the serpent had arrived. Silas revealed the dark truth to Elias. The new captain, Rourke, was his own younger brother. They had both been forced into piracy, but Rourke had embraced the chaos, becoming Thorn's most loyal and brutal enforcer. Rourke's hatred for Silas was deeper than any pirate's. It was the fury of a brother betrayed by his last moral anchor. Rourke would not be misled by traps or turned by logic. He only understood vengeance. Rourke did not follow Thorne's tracks. He simply burned the forest, a reckless, devastating act of environmental rage, forcing the villagers and Elias's group to retreat further into the ruins. He was a force of pure chaotic destruction. The villagers understood that Rourke was worse than the sea. He was the unreasoning fire. Elias saw his intricate defensive work rendered useless by a simple act of total malice. They had to choose a new defense: the ancient hidden tunnels. Yara, seeing the threat, revealed the village's final secret: a deep ancient network of stone-cut tunnels beneath the temple, built by the original civilization to escape war. They were a path to safety and to the mountains. Elias, the builder, was now the gatekeeper. He led the slow, desperate evacuation of the village, ensuring the tunnels remained hidden, sealing their escape route with immense structural stones. The journey through the tunnels was a descent into the earth. The air was thick and heavy, lit only by their flickering oil lamps. The sounds of Rourke's burning jungle were replaced by the drip of subterranean water and the rustle of unseen things. Elias felt a profound connection to this stone. He realized these tunnels were the crowning achievement of the ancient builders, a legacy of survival passed through millennia. His carpentry was now a bond to the history of stone.
Silas produced the ancient astronomical chart he had found, realizing it was not just a star map, but a directional key. Anya, the most adept at reading natural signs, used the faint changes in airflow and the sound of water to navigate the twisting paths. The skills that had served them on the sea now served them beneath the earth. Silas's logic and Anya's instinct were the twin compasses guiding the terrified people through the darkness toward the distant mountains. Rourke finally reached the ruins, finding only the fresh scent of ash and the faint, unsettling silence of an abandoned place. His frustrated rage mounted, knowing they had slipped away again. He began to desecrate the sanctuary. He searched for a sign, a breach, a path. He found the section Elias had repaired, the tightly fitted stone plug concealing the tunnel entrance. He recognized the carpenter's precision, the signature of his older brother's ally. Rourke knew he couldn't move the enormous stone plug by brute force. He ordered his men to find the black powder they'd salvaged. He would use the pirate's tool, explosive destruction, to overcome the builder's craft. Below, Elias felt the distant tremor of the blast. The stone above them shuddered, and dust rained down. The tunnel was breached. They had bought time, but Rourke was now in their labyrinth. Elias knew the tunnels were a maze, but Rourke would blindly follow the main path. He ordered the main group to split, with Silas leading the women and children toward the distant exit, while he and Anya stayed behind to create a secondary ambush. It was a grim sacrifice. Elias handed Silas a final tool, a small, essential chisel, a symbol of the life he was fighting to preserve. Elias and Anya turned to face the advancing darkness. Elias, using his knowledge of stress and load-bearing, quickly identified the structural keystone in a low, critical archway. He began to chip away at the stone, using the alchemist's old chemicals to weaken the mortar. Rourke was pursuing speed over caution. Elias and Anya were counting on the pirate's arrogance to rush past the subtle damage. The tunnel would collapse with surgical precision, sealing Rourke inside his own rage. Rourke and his few remaining men stumbled into the tunnel. The captain was a wild beast now, obsessed only with the capture of Silas. He ignored the widening crack in the ceiling, charging forward toward the faint sound of footsteps. Elias and Anya heard the heavy, rhythmic thud of Rourke's boots, the sound of his arrogance getting closer. It was time. Elias pulled the final supporting wooden wedge he had placed in the weakened keystone. The tunnel arch,
compromised by Elias's work and Rourke's speed, gave way with a sickening, grinding sound. Tons of ancient stone collapsed, instantly sealing the passage and burying Rourke and his loyalists deep within the mountain. The chaos of the sea had met the unyielding strength of the earth. Rourke was not killed by a sword, but by the perfect geometry of a carpenter's trap. The serpent's shadow was finally extinguished.
Elias and Anya caught up with Silas and the villagers. Their path now led upward, through the remaining tunnels, toward the final mountain exit. The journey was a slow, arduous climb toward the light. Silas, seeing his brother's fate, felt a complex grief, not for the pirate Rourke, but for the lost brother. Elias understood. The weight of their past could never be fully escaped, only contained. They finally emerged from the tunnels high on the mountain slope. The air was thin, cold, and clean. Below them, the vast, smoky expanse of the jungle stretched to the sea. They were above the world, safe from the sea and its violence. Yara led them to a hidden valley, fertile and protected, a new promised land. They were home. Elias looked down, seeing the finality of his past, the smoke of the destroyed jungle, and felt the cold, clean air of his future. The last of the gold, recovered from the captain's cache, was used not for luxury, but for tools and seed. Elias, Silas, and Anya began their final, great task, building a new village of wood and stone in the high, hidden valley. The man of the sea would now build a life in the sky. The carpenter's journey ended not in the sea's chaos, but in the ordered peace of creation. He was Elias, the builder, the protector, and finally, a free man. His past contained, his future built with his own two hands. Elias found that building in the high, cold environment presented challenges his seafaring knowledge could not meet. He needed stone for warmth and stability. He became the mountain architect, adapting ancient methods to new purpose. He taught the villagers to build houses with thick, insulating stone bases and high, sloped wooden roofs to shed the winter snow. His new architecture was a blend of his European skill and the tribal need for resilience. Water was plentiful, but required management. Elias applied his knowledge of physics and simple tools, designing a complex system of wooden aqueducts and stone-lined channels to bring clean, fresh mountain water to every dwelling. Silas managed the logistics, ensuring the correct wood was used for the channels and the stone was gathered efficiently. Anya, the forester, found the perfect trees, straight, hard, and resistant to decay.
The soil on the slopes was thin. Silas, with his quartermaster's focus on long-term provision, helped the community design and build intricate stone terraces to create flat, fertile ground for planting the seeds they had acquired. This communal work forged the three castaways into the village's true leaders. They were defined not by where they came from, but by the tangible safety and sustenance they created for others. The first winter arrived early, bringing thick, heavy snow. The village was tested. The wooden roofs needed to withstand the crushing weight, and the stone walls had to hold the interior heat. Inside, the villagers were warm and dry. Elias's construction was proven against the mountain's harsh elements. The work of his hands had kept the community safe when nature threatened their survival. The cold brought them closer. Elias found a small exposed vein of iron ore high on the mountain. He and Silas worked to teach the tribe how to refine the metal, establishing a primitive forge. The forge became the heart of the village, turning rough ore into essential tools: axes, plowshares, and better chisels. The pirates' practical knowledge was now the source of the builders' progress. During the long winter nights, Elias took on an apprentice, a young tribal man named Kael, who showed an innate talent for geometry and structural design. Kael became the inheritor of Elias's combined skill. Elias's final mission was to pass on his knowledge. By teaching Kael, he ensured the village's long-term safety and made his European craft an indelible part of the tribe's legacy. He was building more than houses. He was building a future. Anya, the most adept hunter, often ventured deep into the mountain. She discovered a path the tribe had always avoided, a small, hidden canyon where a stream carried unusual, glistening yellow flecks. It was the treasure the pirates had chased, but in its raw, natural form, a gold vein easily accessible. Anya knew the chaos this metal could bring, and she kept the secret, bringing only a small, heavy piece back to Elias and Silas. The three friends debated the gold. They had seen its destructive power firsthand. They realized that revealing the vein would mean the end of their peace, drawing the world's greed to their hidden mountain sanctuary. They made a final pact. The gold would remain hidden. They would use the small, initial nugget for one critical purpose: to create something of lasting, peaceful value that symbolized their new life.
Using their primitive forge, they melted the nugget. Elias meticulously crafted the gold, not into jewelry or coin, but into a tiny, perfectly weighted carpenter's square, a symbol of truth, measure, and justice. This golden square was presented to Yara, the elder, as a gift. It was a silent, solemn vow. The purity of the gold would only be used for the true measure of their community, never for personal wealth or greed. Their hard-won peace required constant vigilance. Elias directed the building of a high, defensible watchtower on the valley's highest peak, using massive timber and reinforcing the base with the strongest stone. This tower was the village's promise to itself. They would never again be caught unaware by the violence that lived beyond their valley. It was the final structure built upon the ruins of the pirates' threat. Silas, the pragmatic heart of the group, announced his decision. He would use his quartermaster skills to establish a trade route with a peaceful, distant tribe, ensuring their self-sufficiency and continued isolation from the sea's corruption. Silas would carry the gold square, a symbol of their oath, using it as a mark of trust with any outsider he met. He was the sentinel, ensuring the balance between their world and the dangerous world beyond. With Silas gone, Elias and Anya found a deeper connection in their shared purpose. Elias was the stability of the stone, Anya the fluidity of the living jungle. Together, they represented the balance of their new world. They taught the children, built the future, and lived a life defined by honest labor and deep affection. The carpenter and the survivor had built not just a village, but a family, founded on the vows of stone and wood. The first home Elias built for himself and Anya was not their greatest structure, but it was their most precious. It was built with the sturdiest stone base and the finest timber, a monument to their commitment. Inside, the walls were adorned not with gold, but with the carved wooden figures of the jungle's animals and the sea's constellations, a blend of their two worlds. It was the safe harbor Elias had always sought,
A year after Silas left, Anya gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Naira, meaning light or plowshare, a symbol of their new, grounded life. Naira was the true foundation of Elias's freedom. Elias, the man who had only ever built ships, now found himself building a crib. The precision he once used for war, he now used for the peaceful security of his daughter. The shift was profound and final.
As Nira grew, her playground was Elias's workshop. She showed an early fascination with the tools, not the toys. Elias taught her the reverence of the craft, allowing her to hold the smallest, shiniest chisel. Elias understood that the greatest legacy was not the structures he left behind, but the principle he passed on. That honest measure and true work were the keys to a worthy life. Nira was the future of the measure. 10 years passed. The mountain village was now self-sustaining, a fortress of peace. Elias, now older and bearded, stood as the respected chief builder, his authority built on his hands, not his lineage. His original vow, to use his skill for truth and justice, was the foundation of their law. Arguments were settled not by force, but by the measure of the builder's square. The village was an island of order. Anya was the village's eyes and ears. She taught the tribal hunters the advanced tracking and camouflage she learned in the jungle, ensuring their food supply and defensive patrols were swift and unseen. Her past had prepared her for constant watchfulness. She was the sentinel of their soft, hidden peace, protecting the ordered world Elias built with the chaos she mastered. Kale, Elias's apprentice, showed immense skill in integrating the new knowledge. He began designing more efficient homes, using fewer materials but achieving greater strength, the mark of a truly great builder. Elias realized Kale was no longer his student, but his equal. The chain of knowledge was secure, linking European precision to mountain ingenuity. His legacy would continue in the stone and wood of this valley. The watchtower, built by Elias, was manned by the village's strongest. But it was Nira who organized the shifts and the patrol routes, applying her cartographer's logic to their defense. Measure meant safety. Elias realized the true strength of the village lay not in the walls he built, but in the intellectual rigor he instilled. His daughter and his apprentice had inherited the best of his measured world.
While surveying the ruins of the original village, Kaal discovered a small, lead-sealed scroll hidden deep within a stone wall. It was a written record of the ancient civilization's engineers. The scroll detailed the secrets of the ruins, the precise construction of the tunnels, the advanced mathematics of their irrigation, and their philosophy of building for eternity, not for empire. Reading the scroll, Elias realized the ancient builders were much like him, survivors who used measure and knowledge to escape the violence of the world. He felt the kinship of engineers separated by millennia. He gathered the entire village. Holding the ancient scroll and the gold square, he reiterated the village's vow to build only for peace, to measure only for justice, and to keep the secrets of the mountain from the outside world. Silas, the quartermaster, now old and weary, prepared for one final crucial journey. He needed to establish a permanent, secure, and utterly silent external trade route, bringing in essential knowledge and tools, not wealth. He carried the promise of their gold, using just enough to purchase the seeds of a new resilient grain and a heavy tome of ancient mathematics, symbolizing their true needs. With Silas gone and Elias's health failing, the village rested its fate on the two young leaders, Kael, the pragmatic builder, and Nira, the measured planner. They implemented Elias's final instructions, ensuring every decision was rooted in the measure of justice, sustainability, and communal good. The transition of leadership was peaceful and precise. The true test of their society came not from invasion, but from internal dispute. A boundary line between two families' fields became contested. Kael and Nira used Elias's geometric tools to resurvey the land with irrefutable precision, settling the matter not with force or emotion, but with the cold, clear logic of mathematics. Measure equaled peace. Anya remained the quiet anchor of the community. Her knowledge of the medicinal garden and ancient healing rituals ensured the health and spiritual well-being of the Measured Valley. She was the living balance to Elias's structure, the reminder that life was wild, beautiful, and sometimes chaotic, and that measure must serve nature, not suppress it.
Elias, confined to his bed, spent his final days watching the village through his window, a perfectly built, square opening framing his perfect world. He finally understood that the geometry he mastered was simply the blueprint for a much greater structure, the human heart, built on trust, loyalty, and the precise measure of love. In his final moments, Elias called Kael to his side. With a weak but steady hand, he passed the gold square, the symbol of his life, his journey, and his unbreakable vow to his worthy successor. Kael accepted the burden and the honor, knowing it was not a tool for building walls, but a symbol of the responsibility to maintain the peace that Elias had engineered. The master builder, the measure of the man, finally released his hold on the world. He died quietly in the perfectly square, sturdy house he built for his family. The sound of hammers and saws was silenced across the valley. The entire village paused, acknowledging the passing of the man who gave them the gift of structure and the certainty of peace. Elias's final journey was a measured march to the highest peak. The entire village formed a procession, carrying his body on a simple wooden bier built by Kael. He was to be buried beneath the watchtower, his sentinel of measure, forever looking over the protected valley that was his greatest creation. At the gravesite, Kael placed the gold square upon the stone, declaring the measure of their civilization would endure, protecting the legacy of their founder. Anya spoke of the cycle of life, drawing on the eternal wisdom of the mountain. Elias had returned to the earth he so meticulously measured, his work complete. Silas, the quartermaster, finally returned to the village, having established a secure, silent trade network. He arrived just days after the funeral, weary but successful. He had kept their secret, ensuring that the world's greed never found its way to their mountain valley. He carried the seeds of a new resilient grain and a final book for Elias. The new resilient grain brought by Silas was immediately sown. This act, guided by Nira's resource planning, ensured the physical continuity of this civilization. The survival of the Measured Valley was now rooted in the earth and the collective action of its people. The foundation of peace was the ability to feed themselves, season after season.
As the new master builder, Kael's first decree was to build a new, larger storage cistern, ensuring water security. It was a measured response to the mountain's greatest potential threat, drought. His design was a fusion of ancient strength and Elias's precision, a structure meant to endure centuries, embodying the philosophy of long-term sustainability. The leadership of the valley settled into a council of three: Anya, the keeper of health and tradition; Silas, the quartermaster and liaison; and Kale, the master of building and law. Every decision was weighed on the balance of the measured life, the needs of the mountain, the needs of the community, and the promise of peace. Elias's spirit guided them. Nira, now a key advisor to the council, took on the task of revising the village history, incorporating the ancient scrolls' warnings and Elias's lessons. The children learned that their civilization was a deliberate choice, a refuge built by measure, maintained by secrecy, and founded on the rejection of the outer world's chaotic greed. Elias's final project, the Grand Hall, stood complete and strong, ready to serve as the village's heart. It was now used daily for meals, councils, and learning. The people gathered under its perfect measured roof, celebrating the enduring legacy of the man who built it. Years passed. The children grew, learned, and built. The village did not expand its borders, but deepened its roots, growing stronger in its isolation and measured life. The walls of the mountain, the accuracy of the square, and the silence of the trade route became the three unbreakable pillars sustaining the peace for a new generation. From the outside world, the valley became a myth, a whispered legend of a hidden haven lost high in the impenetrable peaks. No map marked its location. No greedy army found its way. The true treasure, the gold, remained untouched, deep beneath the earth, a forgotten lure, a silent promise that their sacrifice for peace was worth its weight. Nira, now a seasoned woman, often visited her father's grave. She knew the secret of his life, that the greatest structures are not built of stone, but of principles. She renewed her vow, promising to maintain the measured peace for her children and all the generations that would follow, ensuring Elias's legacy would never crumble. The gold carpenter's square, once a symbol of the world's destructive greed, had been redeemed. It was now a sacred relic, the eternal measure of a just and peaceful civilization. Its perfect right angle forever reminded them: measure your life with purpose, build your society with precision, and your legacy will withstand the storms of time. Elias, the man who was once a slave to the sea, lives on in the sturdy, beautiful walls he built. He is a sentinel of peace, forever looking over his creation. His final monument was not stone or gold, but the thriving community, the strong houses, and the peaceful lives of the children he taught. He had used his life to measure not the depth of the sea, but the potential of human creation. His greatest vow was kept. He was home,